Welcome, everyone, to Get Your Game On, the channel dedicated to immersive gaming experiences. And joining me today is a special guest, a true friend of the channel, and a very, very wise gentleman, Mr. Jeff Weaver. Thank you for taking the time and joining us. And we're going to talk about an interesting topic. For those of you that may not have been following the channel, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I posted my thoughts on the customer service at Pimax and the treatment I was getting. And to say that that video got a little attention, I would say is a slight understatement. So what we did after that, I actually had a follow-up interview with, I believe he was the head of communications for Pimax. He reached out to me and wanted to give his side of the story. So we did an interview for that. And I was talking with Jeff, and I came up with the idea of doing a follow-up on this from our perspective. Basically, what I think Jeff and I are going to talk about is what we think Pimax should be looking at doing. And I want to make a couple points before we even start. First and foremost, I firmly believe that Pimax needs to stay in the industry. They are critical for the VR industry, and just point blank, there is no competition to the Pimax Crystal Light right now. That headset, there's nothing like it for the price point and the quality you get out of it. But then the problem becomes Pimax as a company needs to make sure it takes care of its customers. So that's the first point. I'm not hating on Pimax and wishing them ill and want them to go out of the industry. I want them to stay, but I also want them to take care of customers. My second point, if you watch the other video, I firmly believe that Jap is absolutely sincere in his desire and his direction to try to improve Pimax. I don't doubt him at that. My concern is he's going up against a long tradition of corporate culture that I'm not sure if he's going to be strong enough to overcome. So we're going to touch on some of that, but I wanted to make sure that that was clear. This is no way just to hate Pimax. Let's see them, go away. I don't believe that, but I also believe there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I brought in someone that I believe is probably one of the best people. It's amazing, Jeff. Every time we do something like this, the name that comes to mind when it's like, I need an expert in this field is Jeff Weaver. So I'm going to. I am so thankful you're here. And just so people know that we're not just armchair quarterbacking or anything like that, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your expertise and kind of share with the audience why you may actually have a more informed opinion about this than the average person out there. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Mark, for the introduction again. I consider you a good friend. And I really, like you said, this just came from conversations that we had ourselves. And to give some background as to why we started talking about it and give some insight to what I've done. Previously to becoming kind of my own self-employed consultant, and when I worked for and kind of help out, which is publicly known, Sim Racing Studio, as well as other clients out there. One of the things I did for 12 years prior to that was work for Amazon, where I was a senior program manager and specifically handling device and digital launches. That included everything from the first original Alexa devices all the way into Fire TVs, Fire TV sticks, Kindle tablets, devices out there that probably people don't remember, like the Amazon Blaster, all the way to other digital launches, the original Amazon Cloud Drive, switching from the old original Amazon MP3 services to the Amazon Music services, including up to the recent live services that they've done, the original Thursday Night Football launches that we did,
Wow.
as well as Champions League in Europe and whatnot. So over that 12 years of time, I had a lot of experience kind of seeing the inner workings. Specifically, what I did handle was a lot of the customer service readiness in terms of getting global teams ready to be able to handle these different products. But I was also really privy and involved and embedded a lot with the product teams and development processes, from everything from go-to-market meetings to the actual launch, and then post-launch cycles in terms of getting everything kind of sorted out and then moving on to the next product. And I think where to me, what was the catalyst for this is much like you, I want Pimax to succeed. I have a Pimax AKX. It was a great headset at times when it worked. And but it was like what you said. It was Pimax is one of those one companies that kind of got it regarding VR, right? Wide field of view,
Yep.
great visuals, right? They did work and started getting, the Demas headsets and whatnot, or the
Yep.
KMS, whichever ones you wanted to get.
Yep.
Um, and they, were using display ports. And so it was always a real positive, like, hey, this is the company that it really has the PCVR enthusiasts, in mind. And a lot of the feedback I've given over the years as well with on the Pimax 4 was like, okay, this is how we can make things better. And I think the impetus for this conversation started when we were talking, playing Elite Dangerous.
Like we do.
And I think what sparked it for me was if I suddenly was like the director or a director, or even a VP within Pimax, what would I do? And kind of go from there. So I think that's kind of where the conversation is heading,
Yeah.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to say you have a little expertise in this environment would be a fair statement, I think. So we'll let the viewers
Yeah.
decide that, but I personally don't know anybody better qualified to talk about this topic. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you're willing to share your expertise here.
And
And
that's really what it is that hopefully someone in Pimax sees it. Hopefully someone asks some of the questions internally. Like a lot of this stuff is going to happen in the background, like you said, like the corporate culture
yep,
that Jap and the other people will have to kind of deal with, which because there's different moving elements in that, right?
yeah,
And the first thing before I get into that part was where I would say customer service is not the root issue here, right? Customer service is a reaction to the issues that come from a product, right? If you have a perfect product and perfect in every kind of way, customer service doesn't really need to exist, right?
right.
They're there to try to sometimes pick up the pieces, help the customer solve an issue, get in there when the product fails or something like that, or questions, whatnot. And that becomes questions become a little bit more about like FAQs and marketing kind of things. But customer service and the issues that they're facing within Pimax at time, they don't determine the policy, right? They are enacting the policies that have been given to them by the finance team and by the product team. Um, and that's when we'll get into like what I would call, the triangle of the push pull,
Okay.
which is in any kind of company, and you will have different focuses for each group, right? The product team is really usually focused on making a good product. That's what they want to do. That's where the passion comes from. Like, hey, we want to make a great VR headset, right? So we want to make the best headset. Rarely does some product team say like, oh, we just want to do a subpar kind of
Yeah,
thing.
we want to see if we can make
And
the worst headset out there. Let's see if we
exactly,
can
and
accomplish that.
exactly, and I get it. There's metrics out there people call minimal lovable product, which is a term I hate, but they have to operate within a certain constraint. That constraint is finance, right? So the first kind of side of the triangle that I always looked at it was the product team. They're trying to make a product. They want it to be successful. No one on a product team wants to have their reviews tank and have a poor product. The other side of that triangle is finance, right? How are we going to actually pay for this product to be made? How much money are we going to make for it? And embedded with finance in a way is kind of marketing. We need to
Hmm.
make money off of this thing, right? And so their focus is figuring out those push pulls. Like, can we make it cheaper? Can we get it out earlier? Can we get pre-sales for it? How do we market it to get more people to buy it, right? And they are on another side. And the kind of another foundation of that triangle to me is the customer service part,
Yeah,
which is they want to help the customer as much as they can, right? But they are beholden upon those two pieces of the product team and what they're able to do from a policy perspective, as well as that's guided from the policy perspective, the finance team. So when we get into situations like that you had, of which here is your device, and they're going to give you, they're trying to get answers, and it's taking a long time to get the answers, right? Usually that's because of the policies created by a product team, which is, hey, we don't want to have a large defect rate. We want to try to solve the issue. So you need to file or submit a ticket, or you need to follow these processes. And then on the other side of that is like, okay, well, now CS needs to wait for that ticket response from the engineers as to what next steps, or they need to wait for approval before they can do something. those policies are also dictated by a financing team, which is like, well, we can't just give everyone brand new headsets anytime they have a small little scratch on the side of the casing, right?
Right.
Or we need to figure out how to problem solve the issue for the customer before we replace it, because again, shipping and whatnot costs money. So those policies are dictated by the product team and guidance through the financing team. Because trust me, every customer service associate on the other side of that call would love to solve the problem for you immediately. Money doesn't always solve the problem. Money doesn't solve your problem on a Friday night when your headset's failing and you want to play the game, right? You want it to work right away. But policy is what gets in front of that, right? And so the key there is always, to me, is like enabling customer service to be able to take care of the customer. And I think that's what Jap was really talking about in that previous video. I was always looking for like, what are those key policy decisions that they're going to make? It's not one thing to say, hey, we're going to do more training, or we're going to see what we can do to expedite things. It's like, no, the policy becomes like, hey, if you have an X device and it's out of warranty, but there's a ticket that's been created within the warranty process, our policy is to extend that warranty for another 6 months or maybe a year, right? It's very similar to what Intel did with the issues that they had with their microcode, where they realized that there was a problem. That they had processors that were failing because of the microcode and overheating and becoming damaged. And they decided to extend their warranty by 3 years. Right? Out of the box, right? Boom. If you had a bad, here's an extra 3 years on it. And then in addition, when you call to get a replacement for your device, which I had to do with on my Intel 13900K, they're out of stock. So what did they do? They didn't say, hey, send us $300 more and we'll give you a better one. They're like, hey, would you be interested if we replace it with a 14900? Like, sure.
For
right?
No extra charge, right?
For no extra charge, right? And they pay for the shipping and everything like that. Now, there is definitely a cost to that has to be approved by the financing team of Intel. But they sat down and wrote it all out and said, what is the cost to us in terms of credibility, in terms of future customers, et cetera? Now, Intel has some other issues when they're dealing with gaming right now. But I will say, as a person that was infected by that and had to go through that process, I was impressed. Right. And so that bought at least a potential customer in the future again that says, well, Intel did take care of me. They didn't throw me under the bus. And so finance at times has to weigh those pieces out. Right. And still, at the end of the day, finance has to make sure that at the end, at the end of the quarter of the month, the balance isn't negative, because people still need to be paid, right? The moment you can't pay your employees, the moment you don't have a company or a corporation anymore.
Exactly. And that was the thing that I think I was frustrated about when we did the follow-up interview. And again, I totally believe Jap was sincere, but I wanted to hear what policy changes, just like you're talking about, what are the policy changes you're making? Because we've heard for years from Pimax, oh, it goes against our core belief, we're going to do better, we're going to do more training, blah, blah, blah. And it just is to the point where this is the same old thing I've always heard. What are you changing specifically? And he never really had anything. He did say they're going to hold back more stock, which is, that's tangible. So they had more replacements. So that was good. And he talked about giving the CS agents more, flexibility in what they do, which I'm not sure that's the right answer, because he wanted to lower the amount of gray areas. And to me, you're actually increasing how many gray areas there are doing that. So I don't necessarily agree with that. But I honestly was disappointed by his responses, because I wanted to hear something like you said, we're going to go ahead and extend the warranty 2 years for any Pimax headset that has a problem, or it's just something tangible. So I totally hear what you're saying, and that's where I felt a little disappointed after the last interview that I had with him.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. Like, you hit it on the head. Like, when you start, customer service associates want to follow the rules, right? They want to have a great customer contact at the end of the day. But associates and customers, or customer service, again, they're not always like beholden to the financial quarterly results, right? They are more worried about when they get off of work, are they going to get home on time, when their lunch break is, and whatnot. The moment you start putting in like, okay, you're an associate and you get to make a decision over whether you think it's warranted or not, well, now you're going to get the one person that is really hungry, wants to get to lunch right now. They might just say no and they're out the door. Whereas another person might put in, go above and beyond, for 45 minutes and advocate for you for a replacement. There's an inconsistency there.
Yes.
And it's not fair to the associate to start putting that kind of decision making upon them as to now they need to judge the customer's credibility and the issue they're having. There was a kind of a thing that we said in a policy, which was always trust the customer, always advocate for the customer. That is the way that you make great customer service. Is the moment you put the agent in a place to where I am now judging if you're lying, right? Then all of a sudden it's like you've broken the trust. Right. The way that you avoid that situation is you create crystal clear policies that the associates follow. Right. And that at the same time, you have to sometimes toe the line. Right. Meaning if you say, hey, we're going to extend the warranty to 2 years, but 2 years comes up and that person calls in at 2 years and 1 day, do you make an exception? Because if you're going to make an exception, then why not just make it 2 years and 2 weeks? Right? That you have to create a policy that advocates for the customer, that fits within the financial aspect of what the policy, the product team and the financing team want to do. But it has to be something that is consistent so that everyone knows exactly what you're going to get. I mean, that's why the EU has the 2-year policy. Yeah, and feels fair.
It has to feel
right?
fair. Absolutely.
That every product, it's like, if you buy a car, right, you're going to have a warranty on it. But if the car breaks down 8 years later and it's like, well, they're not going to go update your car all of a sudden. It's like you bought an old car, right? It's the same thing with the headset. If you have a headset for 2 years and it breaks after 2 years and it's after the 2-year warranty policy, sorry, that sucks. Sometimes that happens, right? So, but the key there is having the policies that are fair for the customer. And don't create situations like yours where it's all of a sudden, well, they filed a ticket with the 1-year policy. They're now out of warranty. Hey, if you want to spend $300 extra, we'll give you a new headset. Sorry, so sad, so bad, right? It's about sometimes identifying the issues or the core issue that's happening to the customer. And that starts to tying into what we were talking about. Like, what is the first step that I would have done as a director?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. If I magically could wave a wand and said, Jeff, I'm putting you in charge of Pimax. I'm putting you VP. You tell me what we need to do to fix Pimax. What would you do?
The first thing I would have them do is like, I need to see data, right? And there was another saying, trust but verify. But I always loved the idea of, in God we trust, everyone else must bring data, right?
Oh, okay.
So
that's a spinoff on "In God We Trust, Everybody Else Must Pay in Cash." So,
exactly. So it was the thing of the first step. The very first question I would have is like, what is your defect rate, right? What is out of your production units? How many of these are failing? And more about, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, I want to see the reverse logistics, and reverse logistics is the team and the people and the incoming of any type of device that goes out the door from a production device and comes back, or is reported as broken, or is coming and shipping back. It's like, what is that percentage compared to the production rate, right? Now, different devices in the industry have different values for that, right? When you're dealing with electronic devices and stuff, it might be like around 2%. When you're starting to deal with like big screen TVs and whatnot, it can get up to 10 to 20%, meaning that devices and like big TVs break in shipping. Right. It's just a natural fact of it. Whereas the smaller devices, if you have a defect rate of 4 or 5%, that's pretty high. Right. And it's like, you need to drill down into that. The thing that I think that Pimax struggles with at times is analyzing the reverse logistics to figure out what is their actual defect rate, and then sitting down and applying what particular fixes we can do in the current production line. Right. So the data that I would want to see is like, do you have a simple percentage? Okay. The first goal, no matter what it is we need to half that particular percentage. But the way we need to actually figure out how to do that is we have to look at those percentages and break down every single thing as to why it's coming back and why it's defective. Is it a high rate of lens issues? Is it a high rate of screen issues? Is it cable issues? Is it housing issues? Do we know when the defect happened? Was it at shipping? Was it 2 weeks after use? Was it 3 months after use, etc.? And so that way you can start actually analyzing what is the actual core issue that we're having, right? Then you can go back into production, your production line, and see if you can start making adjustments to that. Now, That becomes difficult with the current process that you have. You get your production set up, you get your key, you're starting to key your tooling for everything for that particular, PCB, getting the screens set up, getting everything assembled, having it being packaged and all that. That all costs tons of money to get set up, and going back and just tweaking small little things is expensive, right? But that's the first thing I would do is when identifying what is the current issues that they're facing, and that way it starts giving you a target for the next devices, such as the Crystal Supers, or maybe even the products that are coming after that, right? The second piece is I would want to have an audit of every single you might call a go-to-market meeting for the almost 3, if not 3 to 4 quarters, if not every week prior to their launch dates of the Crystal Light, meaning product teams, marketing teams, finance, customer service, legal, and a whole bunch of other teams get together, if a weekly, if not every other week or whatnot, to sit down and look at their go, no-go statuses for a product, right?
Okay.
It's this product development 101. And what that is, it says as they are tracking towards their deliverables in terms of making sure that they're going to hit their launch dates, every team is reporting whether they are go or no go, or in other industries or stuff, it might be, are they red, meaning that they have blockers that will prevent them from hitting their milestone markers?
Okay.
Are they amber, which means they're at risk for hitting their milestone markers? Or are they green, meaning they are on track?
Okay.
The one thing that I feel that Pimax probably has is a culture of green, or a culture of yes, meaning that you can get into product teams and development teams that are so afraid of ever being a blocker to a launch that they will always push things to be amber or green. And that's the first thing I would look at. And if I didn't see a lot of red in certain areas where people were not ready, I'd be like, the first thing you have is a culture of just too many people saying yes. So therefore, you're shipping products that aren't ready. And you're trying to either fix it in post-production with software or whatnot, maybe. But again, you're not going to be able to fix those devices that have already gone out,
right?
I.e., the lens issues that we're seeing, or screen issues, right? The problem used to be with Pimax when I had my 8KX was the hardware's solid. Hardware's great, works. The issue was software.
Right.
And it seems like Pimax kind of fixed the software, but for that, the latest issues and whatnot, they're struggling with, is the product itself ready to go, right? So that's the second piece, is doing an audit and changing that culture. Now, the key there is changing the culture. You can't have a culture of pure yes, because then you'll never actually see what the real problem is. The key is making a culture that says, hey, if someone is red, please call it out, because then we will give you all the focus, all the energy to help you resolve that, to get over the hump, to at least get to amber, right? Not a, hey, you've missed your goal and you're bad, you're going to be fired. Or, hey, you missed your goal and we're going to cut your funding. It's almost like, I want to know who are struggling, who are the red ones, because that's where everyone needs to do work, and let's all get together and start focusing on that to get them into the place where they're either amber or at least, pushed into green. And that doesn't mean, and this is the key thing for anyone that ever does program management, the worst thing you can ever say is, well, we'll get that back to you next week. Right? It's like, no, there is no next week. I know the product launch isn't for like a year or maybe 6 months from now. We're going to solve this afternoon or tomorrow. And we're going to come up with a game plan to get this read so that you feel less stressed, that your team feels less stressed, and we get you the help that you need, right? It has to be a community or a group effort to get that product into where it needs to be, right? So that's what I mean. It's like standing back, looking and auditing, going, where are the hidden issues? Where are the teams that are afraid to speak out? Is there a director or a VP that's getting in the way, that's pushing too hard, rather than actually working together as a group to create a great product and really to get it out the door on time, depending on, again, the financial goals, right? Because again, there's that triangle always, right? We could spend all the time doing product development. At the same time, we got to make money because we need to pay the bills and we need to pay our employees, right?
You're talking about Valve? What do you wait?
Valve doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah, I know.
When it's the classic, like Valve does nothing, makes billions, right?
But that's what Valve is product development. That's what
Yeah.
that's what they
But
do.
but in case of Valve, it's like they took the route of putting the customer first,
Yes,
right? And by
absolutely.
putting the customer first, they've created a software and an environment or almost a community where everyone trusts Valve. Many different companies
Yep.
have gone out to try to create their own launchers, to create their own services. But when you look at Valve, they've always been about the customer, right?
Hmm.
Yes, they have refund policies that might be restrictive, but those policies are very clear. You can play up to, what is it, 2 hours of the game or 1 week, and you can return it, no questions asked, right? It's a digital game, right?
Yep.
That is a very clear policy that they stick to, but it is favored for the consumer. They also have Steam DB. They're not going to hide their numbers of use cases, right? Because if you make a great game, you'll have 3 million people playing it. You make a bad game, you're going to have a couple hundred people playing it, right? So again, that services the customer, and by servicing the customer, you create an environment, you create a loyalty, and that
Right.
person will come
That's
back and do
that's
it,
key.
right?
That loyalty,
Right?
which is the hardest thing to get, but man, when you get it, it is powerful. And so,
Exactly.
so what I
Yeah.
hear you saying, you're talking about you've got teams. So when you're out there, you're again the vice president. You're in charge of everything. So you're telling me if everybody's green, you're like, well, somebody's lying. So
Someone's lying.
okay,
Yeah. There's nothing that's ever perfectly aligned, running. Everyone's green. Everyone's maybe a couple of people are amber and no one's red, right? It's that thing of like someone's red and they're just not being truthful about it right now, right? Because if everyone's green and yellow, it's like, well, cool, I'll move up the launch date half as much and
right,
we can launch in 4 weeks, right?
right.
Then everyone will be like, well, time
Yeah.
out, right?
We might be
It's
we might be a little orangish. You know, that's what
exactly, exactly.
yeah.
So it's identifying those, but then again, it's the culture of like whoever, if it's the director, or the or vice president or VP or whatnot, they need to step in and create a culture of like, okay, that's fine. It's not
Yeah.
bad. That's how the world works. What we need to know is what do you need to get to amber? Do you need more teams? I can bring more. We can shift people over that are green right now to help you. We can figure out if there's alternatives out there we can do to find, in terms of whatever it might be, whether it's production or manufacturing or whatever it may be. Maybe we need to shift some funds from finance to get you additional SDEs or software development engineers or engineers to be able to help solve this root problem, right?
So
But the culture cannot be, hey, you're in trouble because you're
right.
red and you're going to cause this not to launch. It needs to be, hey, you're red. Thank you for letting us know. Let's all get together so we can solve this
Yeah, I
problem.
mean that's beautiful. I mean, and that totally makes sense. So we already talked about it's not really the customer service agent's fault, and it shouldn't be their responsibility to determine this. So,
Yeah.
as vice president of Pimax, where do you hold the accountability? Where do you look at to make the changes that need to be made? Tell me
The,
what that looks like.
the first one is, sorry, marketing, right?
Oh,
Marketing needs to take a second seat, right? Right
mm-hmm.
now, marketing is a little bit gone wild with Pimax, right? And we can dial back the Wayback Machine, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
just roll it back to the 12KX, right? Um, or what they tend to do, which they've done with the Super, which is, hey, we're launching the Super, but we could take pre-orders now, but the other devices aren't going to come out to the next quarter or whatnot. Now, it's not all marketing's fault. It's the product team's fault. Why? Because they have go-to-market meetings where they'll sit down and say, hey, marketing needs to sell stuff, right? That's their goal, is to sell stuff. And they need to make sure that finance has the money so that they can stay in business. So what they do is they go to the product team and they'll say, hey, product team, are you ready to announce X? Are you ready to announce the Super? Right now, the product team has a decision there. They have their goals, their metrics, as in, I'm sure their goal and their metric was we need to launch the Super, at least announce it by the end of Q4 of 2024.
Yep.
Right. So we can make our financial obligations, right? We're investors, et cetera. So that's why it was announced. And that's why there's a pre-order. But the other devices aren't quite ready until Q1. Right. That tells me that their marketing is driving too hard and too aggressively to get products out the door that aren't ready, right? And that lies back onto the feet of the product team saying, hey, yes, we are we are ready. We can announce this, even though we're not ready to ship it, even though now we have a Q1 kind of thing. And this kind of goes back to the history of the other devices they've launched, right? So the key there is one, going back to and agreeing with financing, setting what their financial goals are going to be. Marketing is going to market, right? It's like I won't call it a wild animal, but they will they will market whatever they can,
Yeah.
right? So I don't necessarily blame marketing. What I do blame is the product teams and whatnot agreeing to schedule out things that aren't quite ready yet, right? The key there to me as well is looking at, and so you get into those broken promises stuff, and it's like the classic state. I had to write it down. The classic statement from, let's call it the unequivocal master of design himself, of Steve Jobs, of, so that the people, when you get to a point that the people that can make the company more successful, and sales and marketing people, and they end up running the companies, and the product people get driven out of the decision making forums, and the companies forget what it means to make a great product, right? That kind of famous quote. You can see that in the 12KX, right? They don't even have the technology yet to
Right.
kind of figure out how to make it. But the marketing team, hey, this is how we can get sales. This is how we can push forward. We'll come up with
Promise the
this.
world. Promise the
We'll
world. Promise
promise the world,
everything that everybody
right?
wants. We'll just promise that that's what we're going to do.
Exactly. Or we'll have the Pimax Crystal Light or the Pimax Crystal. Oh, we're going to come up with wide FOV lenses, right? For the people that don't know the FOV lenses, right? Yeah, exactly.
Where am
Exactly. Or here we are with the Super. Okay, well, we have this one, but we're going to have the OLEDs coming soon. Those are going to come soon. Q1, right? So marketing is driving heavier sales because, again, they have their goals, right? Finance loves that because that's aligning with what finance wants to do. And the product team is in the back going like, hey guys, time out. We're not quite ready, but I guess you can announce the Super now, right?
Okay.
So that's where they need to take a deep breath, right? People would rather have a good product when it's ready versus like, hey, we got to meet the goals. So here comes the thing that we can't make the promise with. So that'd be the second thing I would do is like marketing. You need to chill for a little while, right? Maybe a quarter, maybe 6 months. And product team, you need to stop saying yes to when you're not actually ready to launch a product. And that kind of ties into like, this is the broken promise aspect. But someone that wrote something recently was regarding they're spreading themselves too thin.
Yeah.
Right. So their marketing and finance and whatnot are trying to capture lots of markets. That's their job again to do.
Yep.
Right. But the moment you spread yourself so thin, it was another saying that I used to say all the time. It's like, you can only ever do 100% of one thing. Right. So in a product team environment, when they're launching the new supers, they're launching 3 different versions.
Right.
That means that only one device will ever have 33.3% of the attention of everyone.
Well,
And the
plus
other ones
still you're messing with the lights and all that.
you're still missing with the
Yeah.
lights. But let's just say like current production, right?
Yep.
It's like the engineers and the people that are doing everything are now splitting their attention to 3 different products. You can say it's still the same base, it's the same thing. It's like there's complexities that go into that. You're going to have different software builds. You're going to have to, and we'll get into it, but you're going to have different EVTs, DVTs, and PVT models.
I have
There are
no
going to be
idea
3
what
different versions.
any of that
I know, I'll
meant,
go
but...
over it in a second. But you're starting to, again, split your attention and split your teams up too much. And that's, again, kind of goes back to like the crystal and like, okay, well, we're going to have different lenses, and we're going to have another key example. We're going to have local dimming and non-local dimming.
Yeah.
Right. The biggest thing I would go into the Pimax as well, and like you guys have to stop the multiple product, and you need to focus on one product, and you can have a variance in that one product of memory size, much like the Quest 3,
Right.
right? But when you think about like when the iPhone launched, it was like, here's the iPhone. You can get it in this size, 32 or whatever memory size is, right? When you still go to the iPhone, they might have a few different versions now. Why? Because marketing is weaseling their way in to kind of come up with different versions. But when you looked at the original like devices that they would launch, it's like, here's the original device. Almost every successful product that comes out, it's like, here's the product, not here's the suite of products.
Right.
So we can cover all of our bases. That will allow Pimax to get back to, oh, I can devote 100% of my attention to the one crystal super that we're doing with this one lens type with this one display panel, with this one software build, so we can make sure it actually goes out and it's successful,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, just to speak to that, if you look back to Valve, you look, there was one index, one.
Hmm.
That was it, and that is arguably the most successful headset out there.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
and
Yep.
I've always felt, and this is where my marketing comes in. I've always felt, man, Pimax should be just laser focused on the crystal light, because there is no other headset that's in that crystal light space. That is like the target. That's like, oh my goodness, we have the golden egg here. And
Yeah.
you want to start talking about, okay, we're getting into the supers, we're getting into all that, the OLEDs. Well, guess what? At that price point, you're now looking at maybe a low end VR1. If you're looking at OLEDs, Megan X is coming out. So why don't you focus on your competitive advantage of this crystal light that there's nobody touching it,
Yep.
instead
Yep.
of moving away from that? And now we're going to move on to the supers, where we have multiple competitors up there. And so it makes no sense from a marketing standpoint to me to follow what they're doing. It makes no sense
Yep.
to me.
It goes back into, like, again, they're trying to cover all bases. They're trying to spread a net for finance to capture lots of different markets, right? To drive the price point down. Again, that goes into marketing. Well,
Sure.
if we get the price point down 790, we will increase adoption rate and purchase pricing by 20%, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Versus the concept of going back to like Steve Jobs or whatnot, which is make a great product
Yes.
and people will come and buy it. There's a reason people would pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a monitor base for a Mac or whatever like that, because they believed in the product, right? And the same thing, it's like you don't need to go out and make a $3,000 headset, right? But make a very singular solid headset. It'll reduce your production costs, right? But the fact that they again, it's like looking at Quest as an example. They came out with the Quest 3. They had two different models of memory, and that's it. A year later, after they've successfully launched that product, they decide to launch the Quest 3S, right? I know,
I
but they
know.
launched it. It's a different product. It,
Yeah.
it didn't divide their attention from the Quest 3. So that way they can spend all their attention on the Quest 3S.
And
And
and to that
yeah,
point, they also reduced all the SKUs of the Quest 3S, and they said now we have a Quest 3S. It's all 512,
exactly.
and so they're not adding to the basket. They're going, we're going to take this out. We're going to still give everybody the option for the best one, and then we're going to add. So essentially, they're still in the same boat they always were. They're just,
Hmm.
they're not throwing that wide net. They're just moving products in
Exactly.
and out. So their focus, again, like you said, they weren't only 100%. They haven't divided that anymore because they took one out, and now they can focus on that. So yeah, it totally
Exactly. And
makes
so
sense.
and so even with, again, going back to that, like the clarity of focus for what Pimax need to do in a product standpoint goes into looking at the PCL. It's like, okay, well, you want to get a Lighthouse faceplate? Well, now you have another team that has to start dealing with the production of Lighthouse faceplates and whether they connect, right? Well, you want to have no audio or you want to get the DMS. Well, now you have separate teams and separate, we'll call them product ASINs or whatnot, or product numbers, where now they have to figure out, okay, well, now I got to get this thing attached onto the headset. And is there going to be audio latency? I don't know. We haven't tested it yet because we're trying to do all this other stuff at the same time, which the Crystal had latency issues in
Yep.
terms of audio, and they're still trying to work those issues out. And when you create this large number of different, trying to cast a net because it's driven by marketing and finance, the product team gets to a point where they're struggling to hit their deadlines. And that's what we're seeing today, right? Where there are certain devices that were promised still aren't coming along, whether it's the lenses or whatnot, or here's a new announcement, and here's this one device that we're going to have, but we're going to have others coming down later. It ties back into a comment said, like, there's really only one VR real business, which is the Quest. It's why? Because they announce it 3 weeks later, it's in the stores and it's there. It's not like, hey, we're going to have it come out later, or hey, we're just taking pre-orders now and maybe the production is kind of ramping up. No, it's like you focus on one product, you get your tooling up for it, and you send it out. And that ties into what I was talking about, which
Okay.
is EVTs, EVTs, DVTs, and PVTs. What these are is anytime you're producing a product, right, you'll hear of prototypes. A prototype is when the product team or the VPs and the CEO, and the reason I don't talk a lot about a CEO in this is that the CEO is really responsible for heading the direction, right? He could definitely step in and start changing these cultures here, right? But he's getting the information that's coming from the VPs, that comes from the directors, that come from the product teams, right? And that's why I really focus on the product teams and the directors. It's like that's where a lot of the information comes in, and they have the decision to say, hey, who on my team is reporting this? I now need to report this up as green or red or amber or whatnot. But once you get a product and once they say like, hey, we're going to do this new Crystal Super, you create like prototypes, and these prototypes will be like literally a handful, right? All you're doing is like, hey, can we actually make this maybe happen? Once you go from a prototype, you go to an EVT, which is basically an engineering validation test model, right? It's an EVT. You generally won't make a lot of them. You maybe in Pimax cases, maybe they make 10 to 50 of them. And those only go to the development product teams, the engineers, the software dev teams, and whatnot. Those only got people that are getting those, right?
Are these outside the company?
No, these are in the company.
Okay,
EVTs are like
okay.
are super like no one should have these.
Okay.
These are engineering validation tests, meaning it is the very first kind of like we're still tooling up the manufacturing process, but these are some of the early ones we've done in terms of like just getting kind of the basic mold, basic PCBs version 1.0, or not even that, version 0.01s, right?
Right.
Which is, again, the prototype is like we handmade it. EVTs are like the first kind of like we're trying to put it together as to what it might look like, right?
Okay.
Those are where the engineering teams and the software teams are really sitting down and kind of going like, okay, we're now making it actually a product, right? And EVTs are very low in terms of, again, quantity that you make, but it allows them to kind of start figuring out what we should do, right? That is where they need to focus on being focused, which is like, we're going to only have one EVT, and this EVT is going to try to contain everything that we want to launch in this product. Whether it's lighthouse tracking or not, make a decision. If lighthouse tracking is going to be an option, it should be in the EVT. Why? Because then the software dev teams and whatnot know what kind of PCB, what's going to be available, what kind of issues they might have when they're first designing the software, to make sure that the lighthouse tracking works, to make sure the local dimming works, to make sure there's no audio delay issues or whatnot. Because the time to fix that kind of hardcore embedded product stuff is during the EVT model, right?
Okay.
Because once you move from the EVT model, you get into the next one where you're like, okay, everything's looking good. We're feeling pretty good about it. So we're going to start doing, we have the tooling a little bit right in terms of what we had with our contractors, the people, et cetera. We're going to now produce what's called DVT models. DVTs are design validation tests, right?
Okay.
Generally then, in a size like Pimax, they probably make 50 to 100, maybe 200 of those. Where do those go? They go back to the product teams, but they will also sometimes go to maybe someone in customer service to be able to analyze it, to look at it, to get a feel for, they can start looking at how do they create training materials for it.
Okay.
It'll go to maybe a marketing person so they get an idea for what it would be like in terms of the overall look for it, so that the graphic designers and people and whatnot can start looking at like how they would put something together for it. It goes to, but primarily it's going to be back to the product team, the software teams, and the different members of those teams. So they have these design validation tests. It would also be something that can go to forward logistics. Forward logistics are the people that deal with like creating the packaging for it and coming up with like what that's going to be in the packaging, how is it going to survive in stress tests in terms of shipping, et cetera. But DVTs is again where you have, let's call it your really kind of near final say of what changes you need to make, right? Because as that goes out, it's like, hey, everyone, if something isn't working on this thing, this is the time to say it, right? Are the lenses good? Are the screens working good? Are we hitting the metrics that we want to have? Is there any audio latency? Is it backwards compatible with Pimax Play? Are there software issues there, right? How is it working on different headsets and different size faces? Anyone in the teams have any complaints? And even within DVTs, you might have a very very NDA'd out the mind type of control group in terms of testing it right now. Mm-hmm. But that's when you have that chance to still make those little tooling changes or changing a cable, et cetera, or maybe changing a PCP before you get to the final phase, which is going to be the PVT. And the PVT is the production validation test.
Okay.
Meaning a production validation test might not have all the branding on it yet, but it is the first out of the done tooling. Here are the first 100 to 200 Pimax crystals, or that are off the line. Right. We haven't shipped it out anywhere yet, but these are the ones. They're in the production box. They're ready to go. And these are usually what you see with leaks, like people forget like a phone or something at a Starbucks or something like that. Those are your PVT models, right? And what those are is the final chance, right, for everyone to kind of look at it and go, hey, this is working, this isn't working. Because at that point, to change something, it gets very expensive to go back and retool everything. And that goes up from whether it's the lens issue or whatnot. And that's why I was kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, which is a lot of these changes are probably not going to be able to be implemented for the Pimax Crystal Super, right? Because it's already in the PVT model. If they're already taking pre-orders for it and they want to ship these out in March, they're at least in the DVTs for some of them, if not the PVTs for the model that's coming out, right? But that is where you have that last chance in terms of making those adjustments, right? And that it becomes extremely difficult to say we're not ready to go once you have PVT models, because it has to be something that goes up to a VP, if not CEO level, that says we need to put halt on this before we launch that. Does that happen? Rarely. Has it? I know of situations like that. But that's where you come back and you say to financing, right? If we launch this, we now know we will have a defect rate of probably 20 to 30%. How do we mitigate that? Right. And you can kind of start seeing that kind of idea with what happened with the Pimax Crystal Light and the lens issues that they had and whatnot. And I would directly attribute that to their whole idea of spreading too thin, right? Rather than every other VR manufacturer out there, someone had the bright idea like, well, what if we come up with different lens types that you can magnetically put in there, right? Well, now you've just changed the manufacturing process. You can't always validate how things are always going to be in your DVT models or even your EVT models, right? Are they ready yet? Or are they not ready yet? Well, we'll make something later and these will be the widescreen. Well, how do we even know that will work? We didn't have the hardcore tooling, and how do we fix it later on? i.e. why we don't see widescreen lenses, right? So it goes back into the original design documents, the original white papers that they create, which is like, we need to become more succinct. We need to become more focused. We need to stop coming up with different models, and that maybe it'll be the 12KX one day. We will see. But I pray that when they come out with the 12KX, it's like, here is the 12KX. That's it. There's no removable stuff. There's no extra accessories you buy. There's no, do you want to get DMIS model or this other? No, it comes with the, like you said, the valve index. Here is your package. It's perfect as much as we can make it. Maybe there's something you wanted or didn't want. So too bad, so sad. This is what you're getting, and it's going to be 100% of our focus. And I guarantee you, it would be a good product. They'll do a good job at it. Right. But it's like going back into this process I was talking about of like reviewing what they're doing, going through the DVT and the PVT process, because that's, again, another note. I know it's going on forever, but that is where you start looking at your quality assurance and your quality control. Is the transition from DVT to PVT.
And that's like, and just so everybody understands too, Jeff and I have no inside information about Pimax. We don't know what they've done. They may go through some of these processes. We don't know. This is just us from the outside looking in. So, but basically you can tell from what Jeff's saying here, you can see where a lot of the issues that are reality out there, you can see the reason they may be a reality. I mean, all you got to do is follow what's going on, and it's almost like you can say, well, here's what's going on. It's probably because of this. But I just want to make it clear, we don't have any inside information.
Yeah,
we are strictly on the outside. It's
all speculation.
So, if somebody's like, I worked for Pimax and they did everything Jeff just said, it's like, well, that's great, but something went wrong because they're having problems. So even if they did everything Jeff said, the ball was dropped somewhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having the issues they're having. So I just
we wouldn't even have this. Yeah, and we wouldn't have this conversation. We'd be like, we'd be playing on it and like, spouting the wonders of the product itself. And like you said in the beginning of the video, our goal is to hopefully give someone some direction there, or maybe not. It's just us venting, but it gives a quality. And if anything, that's why I'm like, I'm passionate about customer service, and that's why I'm like, it's not customer service's fault. It's the way that you make it not customer service's fault is you make a great product, right? and that you're making policies that make it difficult for like what you went through, and that's not because of customer service, it's because of the product team and finance. And so finally, kind of going back into the EVT and PVT, that's when you get into quality control and quality assurance, right? What systems are they having in place, right? Now you're already in a PVT mode and you're about to ramp up production, and you start noticing that there's certain people or certain lenses issues. That's when that would be the third thing I would do in terms of going in as a director, which is, let me see the information that you have for quality control and reverse logistics, right? I need to see if there's a correlation there. Is quality control talking to reverse? Are they getting the same data? Are people talking on the rear end, which is like, here's the problem we're seeing in the field, and how are you not catching this before it goes out, from production? Like, where's the misstep here? Why are there so many different lens issues, right? We don't see that in other headsets, and we didn't see it in our previous headsets. What has fundamentally changed there? Is it a cost issue? Is it a third-party manufacturing issue? What do we need to do to fix this? And sometimes it is making drastic measures of, okay, we need to stop production of our PVTs and switch over to a new tooling process with a new vendor, because obviously we're not getting the right information from where we thought we had.
Right.
Again, trust but verify, right? You got to get into that detail kind of stuff. And that's my final piece, and kind of like going through it all, which is reverse logistics. Like, how much are they playing in the role of the new product? Are they learning the lessons they learned from the crystal and the lenses, and is that getting applied to the super, right? Are they really digging in and changing their quality control issues, so that when they launch, they will hit the first part of my goal, which is you need to halve your defect rate, right? And be adamant about it, and that there is no excuses, and it's not a thing of fear, like, well, I'd rather have us not launch, I'd rather have us delay another month or two, right, before we launch, to make sure that our quality control is up to snuff. And if that means that our PVT models need to double in the amount of number that we normally do to get a wider range of user bases that are outside of the company, that have different faces and different, so that we can really narrow down what that defect rate is, and have really good quality assurance. Because you can send out 200 units, but if you aren't really collecting the data right and really incentivizing it, 200 people will just get the headsets and be like, yeah, it looks good, sure,
Yeah.
good thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
No, it's like you have to get in there and really drive and work at that to get that kind of metric, so that you're going to launch a good product. And I feel like if they go through and they'll make those changes, right? Of one, again, focusing on making a single product, cooling the jets of marketing, so that marketing isn't going out and making these wild promises, right? Marketing still wants to sell stuff, but give marketing one great product and they will be really happy to go out and promote it, right? They have to change that piece. They have to change the culture, that it's okay to be red. It's fine.
Right.
Please let us know, because we want to come help you get to green. It's not all on you. You don't have to worry about it anymore. We're here as a team. Let's do that. And then again, like customer friendly policies, making sure that their policies are in the best interest of the customer. There is a cost there. Be happy to take it from some of the marketing in terms of what you can do, right? That it's going to be a cost to be able to sometimes extend the warranty, right? But that is something that you have to do sometimes, where you're like, well, this isn't going as we planned because we missed certain gaps between the DVT and PVT model. So now we need to adjust our policy and extend it for customers because they might be having an issue, and apologize them, or extend the refund issue, right? Or give them a credit, or whatever you want to do, right? But there needs to be something that's customer friendly there to maintain that trust after you have a launch that doesn't quite go the way that you're planning.
Right.
Yeah, I think those, I'm looking at some of my notes I took, even before this, I was like, yeah, I think that covers it all, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest one too for them is just, again, going back to that, you can only do 100%, right? The times that I've seen products fail is when they're trying to do too much. They're trying to do too many different models. And because again, everyone can only do 100% of their job. And if you're trying to design things for 3 different models and 3 different whatever, it's like, well, you can only give it over 3% of your focus.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
something else is going to suffer.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think these are all valid points, and I hope Pimax, might take heed on some of this. And so I'm going to take a minute. I want to speak directly to Pimax because after my other videos, I'm pretty sure somebody out there is going to be watching this. Hi, Jap. And I just want to say this, Pimax. I really sincerely hope you guys make it. I hope you can make the changes because I would love to be someone that can say you guys should buy a Crystal Light because it's just an amazing value for the quality of the image and the price. It's just a must buy. But until you prove to me that you have the customer's interest in mind, I just can't do it. So I'm pulling for you, but I'm also not going to support you if you're not going to take care of the people that are your customers. So I'll leave it at that. But Jeff, I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. I don't know anybody else that could have given such an insightful, just dissertation, if you will, of this. And I do hope that somebody at Pimax at least takes some notes and does some changes, some hard changes that actually do make a change, and it's not the same old that it's been for years now of we're going to do better, and then 2 years down the road we're talking about the exact same thing. So Pimax, please fix your stuff and come out with continuing to push that PCVR headset. We need it in the industry. So on that note, anything you want to tell Pimax, Jeff? Anything for closing words? I'm going to give you, just like I gave Jap the last word, I'm going to give you the last word on this one.
I think exactly that. I think the Pimax is positioned to own and the PCVR market,
Yeah,
right? They
definitely
just need
mid-level. Definitely mid-level for sure.
exactly. It's like marketing. I love you guys. You just need to take a back seat. The product team's in charge and the CU. It's like remember why you got into this, right? And like focus on one product and make it great, and you will own the PCVR market, right? And that's it. And people will it'll be great. You will be amazed at when you regain that trust from people, how much people back you up, and the sky's the limit after that. But take a step back, focus, and create that culture where people can be, you know, people work as a team, and the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. So on that note, I think we'll leave it there. Jeff, again, appreciate you coming onto the channel. We love having you on. And obviously, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of comments on down below. So I'll do my best to answer them. It was really hard for you on the last video not to answer comments, but I just wasn't going to get into that. That was Jap Steel, and I stayed out of it completely. This one, I will get back to hopefully getting in there and answering comments and doing that sort of thing. So thank everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative. And that's all we got. So until next time, remember to get your game
Get your game
on.
on.
Bye.